Imagine a single, terrible fire. Flames climb high into the night sky, swallowing a building that holds all the knowledge of the ancient world. Inside, hundreds of thousands of scrolls, filled with history, science, and poetry, turn to black ash. This is the legendary burning of the Great Library of Alexandria, an event we are told set human progress back by 1,000 years. It is a powerful story, a story of one catastrophic moment where so much was lost forever. We picture a world plunged into darkness because of this single act of destruction. But what if that story, the one we all know, isn't true? What if the greatest library in history didn't die in a blaze of glory, but faded away in a much sadder and more complicated way? To find the truth, we have to see what the Library of Alexandria really was. It wasn't just one big room full of books. It was the heart of a huge campus for learning called the Mouseion. This name means Shrine of the Muses, the goddesses of the arts and sciences. It was the world's first true research university. Think of a huge park with beautiful buildings, walkways, gardens for studying plants, and even a zoo. There were lecture halls where great thinkers shared their ideas, and dining halls where they argued and debated. The library itself was just one part of this amazing place, a place built not just to store knowledge, but to create it. The rulers of Egypt who built it had a simple, huge goal: to collect every book ever written. They sent people all over the world to buy scrolls. They even made a law that any ship that docked in Alexandria's harbor had to let its books be copied. The original scrolls were kept for the library, and the copies were given back to the owners. Through this, the collection grew and grew. It may have held over 500,000 scrolls, covering everything from the stars in the sky to the laws of forgotten kingdoms. It was a giant brain for the ancient world, a place where the smartest ideas from Greece, Egypt, and beyond all came together in one spot. But the real treasure of the Mouseion wasn't the scrolls. It was the brilliant people who studied them. A man named Euclid walked these halls and wrote the rules for geometry. The very same rules about lines, circles, and triangles that students still learn in school today came from his mind, right here in Alexandria. Another scholar, Eratosthenes, used the library's knowledge to do something incredible. By measuring the length of shadows in 2 different cities, he figured out the size of the entire Earth. His calculation was so good it was almost perfectly correct. This wasn't just a library, it was a place where the secrets of the universe were being unlocked. So if this amazing place didn't burn down all at once, where did the story of fire and destruction come from? To find the answer, we must turn to our first and most famous suspect, the Roman general, Julius Caesar. He is the one most often blamed for the library's end. The year is 48 BCE. Caesar arrives in Alexandria and gets caught in a dangerous war between the famous Queen Cleopatra and her younger brother. Caesar's small Roman army is trapped in the royal palace, surrounded by a much larger enemy force. With his back against the wall, he is forced to do something drastic to save himself and his men. So, what really happened with Julius Caesar? The story says he burned the library down. But the truth is a little different. During a fierce battle in Alexandria's harbor, Caesar was trapped. To save his fleet, he ordered his men to set the enemy's ships on fire. It was a desperate move in the middle of a war. The fire on the ships grew huge and wild. It leaped from the water to the wooden docks, burning down warehouses that stored goods. Those warehouses likely held some scrolls, perhaps bundles of papyrus waiting to be shipped or sold. But this was not the Great Library. The main building, the heart of all that knowledge, was safe, located much farther inland in the city's royal district. The first real blow to the library wasn't fire, but fear. About 100 years before Caesar arrived, a king named Ptolemy VIII came to power. He was a suspicious ruler who worried about the smart scholars and thinkers in his city. He saw their big ideas as a threat to his control. So in 145 BCE, he did something that hurt much more than a fire. He forced all the foreign scholars to leave Alexandria. This included the head librarian and some of the world's brightest minds. The great brain of the ancient world was emptied of its best thoughts. This was the start of a long, slow sickness. Later, when the Romans took control of Egypt, the world changed. The new center of power was Rome, not Alexandria. The Roman emperors were more interested in building up their own capital. The money that had once flowed to the library and its thinkers began to dry up. The great institution was no longer a priority. Its buildings were not repaired. Fewer new scrolls were bought. Knowledge wasn't destroyed in a single moment. Instead, it was slowly starved, left to fade away from neglect. The flame of learning wasn't put out. It was just given no fuel to burn. Centuries passed, and the city of Alexandria saw more conflict. In the year 272, the Roman Emperor Aurelian fought a brutal war to recapture the city from a rival queen. The fighting raged through the very streets of the royal quarter, the same area where the original library had stood. This was not a war against books, but a battle for power. Buildings were torn down, and the district was left in ruins. If any part of the original library complex had survived until then, it was likely destroyed in the chaos. It was a casualty of war, another piece of the past lost to the struggles of the present. But the legend of a single great fire is powerful, and it points to a real event that was truly dramatic. It just happened to the wrong building. There was another great home for knowledge in Alexandria, a place that held its own vast collection of scrolls. This place was a magnificent temple called the Serapeum. It served as a smaller public library for the city's people, and its end was sudden, violent, and filled with flames. This real tragedy, happening in 391 AD, would become the fiery heart of a myth that has lasted for thousands of years. The final real end for a part of Alexandria's great collection of knowledge was not a single accident. It was a planned attack. A Roman leader named Emperor Theodosius I made new rules that said the old ways of worship were no longer allowed. In Alexandria, a church leader named Theophilus gathered a large group of followers. They marched to the beautiful temple called the Serapeum, which also held a large collection of scrolls. This was not a rescue mission. It was an act of destruction. The crowd stormed the temple, and they tore it down brick by brick. This event was real, violent, and for those who cherished the old knowledge, it was a true disaster. And here we find the most important secret of this whole story. The idea of one giant fire is a simple tale, but it hides a truth that is much more chilling. The great knowledge of the ancient world wasn't lost in a single spectacular blaze. It was picked apart by leaders who stopped paying for scholars. It was starved by governments that cut the money for new scrolls. It was chased away by political fights that made smart people flee for their lives. There was no one big fire, because the library slowly faded away. So why do we hold on to the myth of the Great Fire? Because it's an easier story to tell. A single fire gives us one person to blame, like Julius Caesar, or one tragic moment to mourn. It makes the loss feel like a grand accident. The real story is harder to accept. It's the story of a treasure lost over hundreds of years, not because of one enemy, but because of thousands of small acts of neglect. The legend of the fire became a powerful symbol, a warning of how easily civilization can forget its greatest achievements. And the loss of knowledge was immense, even if it happened over time. We know of incredible books that are now gone forever. Imagine reading the personal science notes of Aristotle, or the complete history of ancient Babylon written by a priest named Berossus. These are treasures we can never get back. But there is also hope in this story. Many of the most important ideas from Alexandria were copied and carried to other great cities across the world. The knowledge wasn't stored in just one place. It had already spread like seeds on the wind, finding new ground in which to grow. The real story of Alexandria gives us a timeless lesson for our own world. The greatest threat to knowledge today isn't a dramatic fire. It's the same slow forces, the closing of libraries, the spread of wrong information, and people simply not caring enough to protect the truth. The library teaches us that knowledge is not a stone monument that lasts forever. It is a living thing. It needs to be cared for, shared, and protected by every generation. The real flame is the one inside us, the fire of curiosity, and it is our job to keep that fire from ever going out. The legend of the Great Fire is powerful. It paints a picture of a single terrible night, a night where all the wisdom of the ancient world turned to ash. This story is told in books and movies. It makes us feel a great sense of loss for a world of knowledge that was stolen from us in one moment. But why do we hold on to this myth so tightly? Because it is a simple story. It gives us a clear enemy to blame, whether it is a careless general or an angry mob. It is easier to imagine a world changed by one big disaster than by 1,000 small, quiet decisions. It's a dramatic tale of destruction. The real story, however, is much more chilling. It tells us that a civilization's greatest treasure isn't destroyed by a single fire. It can simply be forgotten. It can fade away when people stop caring, when money runs out, and when new ideas are seen as dangerous. This slow decay is a scarier thought. Knowledge is not just a collection of scrolls on a shelf. It needs scholars to read it, to argue about it, and to share it with their students. When the scholars were forced to leave Alexandria, the library's heart stopped beating. The scrolls were still there, but the minds that made them special were gone. Let's think about just one idea that was lost. A man named Aristarchus of Samos worked in Alexandria. Long before others, he suggested that the Earth and other planets moved around the sun. This was a huge idea, but it was mostly forgotten for almost 2,000 years. The world wasn't ready for it. Imagine for a moment how our history might have changed if that one idea had been studied and accepted. Our understanding of the universe could be centuries ahead of where it is now. It's a staggering thought. A whole world of discovery delayed because a brilliant idea was left to gather dust. And Aristarchus was only one person. What other secrets were hidden in those scrolls? There are hints of amazing things, stories of steam engines, complex maps of the world, and advanced medical knowledge. We will never know for sure what was lost because no one was there to save it. The loss was not just in science. We know of great Greek playwrights who wrote hundreds of plays. Today we only have a handful of their works. The rest are gone forever. All the stories, the poems, and the histories of entire peoples vanished, not in flames, but through simple neglect. So, the story of Alexandria is not just about the past. It is a mirror reflecting our own world. Today, we have more information than ever before, stored on computers and online. But this knowledge is also fragile. It can be erased, ignored, or lost if we are not careful. The true lesson of the library is a quiet warning. It teaches us that we must protect not only our books and our data, but also the freedom to think and to ask questions. That is the real flame of knowledge. It is a fire within our minds, and it is the one thing we can never allow to go out.